Okay. So we are to discuss analyzing and reporting qualitative results. The qualitative analyst is much like the leader of a jazz band, although they may start out with a general idea of what is to be accomplished, follows each musician so as they improvise on a basic theme. The music is not exactly composed, but rather emerges. So just like in qualitative research, the final product of the analysis emerges as the researcher follows the informant and as they illuminate the question more and more. Qualitative research is grounded in the belief that reality can never be completely known as it is constructed by each individual. So this was discussed before that qualitative research is not really final at that moment. We will have to have it could have a different analysis. If, for example, another researcher will look into your data, it attempts to measure reality are limited to methods that aim to define variables and find manifestations of them, unlike in quantitative research that you will just be a positivist in the view of the context of the phenomenon. Much of human experience is not easily defined. However, the outward expressions may be difficult, if not possible, to detect. Okay. So for the purpose of qualitative research, you have to deal with the definition of a constructivist research, and this attempts to discover the meaning and interpretations of events, phenomena, or experiences by studying cases intensively in their natural settings and by subjecting data for analytic interpretation. So when we say we are getting the experiences by studying these cases intensively in natural settings, meaning we just have to look on the data to interpret what is there and not to give or not to include our biases. Okay. Qualitative research seeks to gather data that illuminate the meaning of an event or phenomenon. Okay, let us not forget that. And the main purpose in doing so is to develop the understanding of meaning from the view of the informant. So this is more of a descriptive qualitative research or the hazard and phenomenology, and data are gathered directly from the informants or through the investigator's observation. So we deal primarily on more specifically on primary data, and qualitative design answer questions about the human experience by exploring the motives, attitudes, reactions, and perceptions. We have here important terms in qualitative research that you should not forget. Okay, if you're doing a qualitative analysis, when we say member checking, it is a method of ensuring validity by having participants review and comment on the accuracy of transcripts, interpretation, or conclusions. And this is the time that you go back to your participants to ask them if the coding or the theming or the categorization that you have done is really a representation of their experiences. When we say an audit trail, it is a detailed documentation of sources of information, data, and design decisions related to a qualitative study. So this one, when we say a detailed documentation, why do we have to have a detailed documentation? So that the reader, okay, will understand how the data emerged to a theme or a category. And when we say generalizability, it is evident through bracketing, negative case analysis, member checking, and external audits. Or again, bracketing, negative case analysis, member checking, and external audits should be done, okay, if we talk about the generalizability of data. Okay, let's continue, guys. Ayan. Let's continue. Sorry, I had to take a call. Okay. So, um, now, so that's generalizability. Then we have here the characteristic of qualitative analysis. Okay. So what are the characteristic of qualitative analysis? Number one, you have to prepare. Again, qualitative analysis may not follow a standard, but it does have some steps that are common to all approaches, and all qualitative researchers must take the following actions. Number one, prepare for data analysis. Conduct the analysis by developing an in-depth understanding of the data. Three, represent the data in reduced form, or four, interpret the larger meaning of data. And this may look like sequential steps, but the distinctions among them are often virtually undetectable because the researcher moves back and forth among the process of data collection, analysis, and drawing conclusions. Okay? Unlike quantitative studies, when analysis is postponed until the data have been collected, qualitative analysis begins nearly as soon as the data collection has begun. So as the data are collected, they are now reviewed. Okay, they are now reviewed, re-reviewed, and analytic memos are written. Okay, newly collected data are compared to existing data to confirm or refute conclusions and to decide when saturation has been reached. Okay, so we have here a constant comparison. So when we say constant comparison of new findings to existing results is a key characteristic of qualitative analysis. It is sometimes called as intensive engagement with the data. Okay, to reflect the depth at which the analyst considers the meaning of the information collected. Actually, this approach enables the researcher to pursue interesting ideas or to sort through confusing input while informants are still available, okay, and data collection is still in progress. So when we say this one, the researcher is then free to follow where the informants lead instead of taking a predetermined path leading to single conclusion. So it's not you who will decide on what data will come out. Okay. Next is we have here theoretical sampling. So when we say theoretical sampling, it involves selection of second sample informants whom less restrictive data are applied within the goal of encouraging diverse viewpoints. Okay. These secondary sites or cases purposely selected to compare and contrast with the sample has already been studied. So pagkatapos mo, for example, if you have utilized purposive sampling and you think you still need a data coming from a theoretical sample, like for example, if your study is all about experiences of nurse managers, okay, in community health nursing, in public community health nursing in the academy or in the hospital, your theoretical sample could be your theoretical sample, I should say, could be heads of institutions, like for example, nurses in the uniform in the uniform institution, like for example, the PNP, the DFP, they could be your theoretical sample. So when you say, actually, your template analysis requires developing a template that provides an analysis guide for sorting narrative data, and this could be discussed in the styles of qualitative analysis. Okay, so we have here template analysis style. In here, the style is appropriate when a study has a clear theoretical perspective because it requires using codes that are devised as a priori. Okay, these codes may be developed theoretically or may be based on established literature. And the advantage of template analysis is its simplicity. It is focused, of course, and structured approach to analysis. And template analysis is more time efficient than the other analytic styles. And it is commonly adopted approach for content analysis and the use of yung code books natin, yung inter-rater reliability assessment, and the data definitions are characteristic of this approach at ginagamit ito for nursing research. Okay? We have here the editing style analysis, or the editing analysis style is, of course, it is for the interpretation of text to find meaningful segments, and the researchers use this for phenomenology, grounded theory, and hermeneutic traditions. Okay, this one, analysis is commonly encountered, of course, in nursing research. And the third one is your immersion crystallization analysis, which is appropriate when the researcher desires a total immersion in and reflection on text, especially during case research and ethnography. So this one is stemming from the notion the researcher is the true analytic tool, kasi diba, the researcher is the number one research tool na ginagamit natin. This analytic approach requires the investigator to be immersed in the data and rely heavily on intuition to arrive at conclusion. So medyo you rely on intuition to arrive at a conclusion. So immersion, it's more on ethnography. Okay, insights do not necessarily come after the data have been collected. It might be arising during data collection as well. So this analytic technique also employs constant comparison. Okay, as the analysis is being carried out and the conclusions are crystallizing, the researcher can better decide. Okay, the researcher can better decide how to proceed in further data gathering. Immersion, crystallization, analysis is a style that appears in the nursing research literature as much as template analysis and editing analysis, but it is still useful in healthcare research. And it primarily downsides are, its primary downside is it's time consuming, of course, like in ethnography. Okay. The qualitative analysis process. So number one, we have here comprehending. Okay. When we say comprehending, okay, let me just reply guys for this message. Wait for a minute. Okay. So for comprehending, it occurs early, again, the process of analysis. The researcher attempts to make sense of the data that have been collected and get a sense of their overall tone. So that's comprehending. When we say synthesizing, it leads the researcher to sift through the data using inductive reasoning to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Okay, when we say theorizing, brings the researcher to the point of what they believe has truly emerged from the data. Actually, this phase continues until the best of the most parang ano na yun, most ano to, occurring explanation has evolved. Okay, when you say it is also called ano yung a parsimonious explanation. Okay, pag sinabing ganon, it is the most focused while providing the best view of the final conclusions. And we say recontextualizing. Okay, recontextualizing, okay, is a process that involves applying the theory that was derived from the analysis to different settings or groups. And this extended exploration could result from an increased generalizability of a newly developed theory. And the precise or the premise of this is it should be recontextualized and it could be generalized. So again, even though this phases are presented here for in a linear fashion, they are rarely accomplished that way. Instead, these phases could typically intertwine in one of the other and may occur sequentially or simultaneously. Management and organization of data. For the management and organization of data, you have here developing themes and codes in qualitative research proceed through 5 steps, and that could be reducing raw data, identifying themes with subsamples, comparing these themes across subsamples, creating coding scheme, or determine the reliability of the coding scheme. To make sense of the narrative data, the researcher must establish a method of managing and organizing the information early in the research process. The analysis process then could be proceed in a logical, if not exactly linear fashion. Organization and preparation of the data include transcription of the audio recordings and optical scanning of the artifacts and other documents, and addition of field notes to transcripts, if you need field notes and other preparatory activities. This is imperative to organize data and effectively, okay, organize data effectively so that they could be thoroughly evaluated and their confidentiality could be preserved. And data that are not well controlled are the risk or are at risk of the misuse and of course your unauthorized access, baka may ibang nakatingin sa data nyo. Given this risk, data management is primarily consideration or a primary consideration or a primary consideration for a qualitative researcher. And remember that each piece of information that has been collected should be cataloged in some fashion. For each piece of data, the source of data collection and the type of data should be noted because qualitative inquiry often generates multiple types of data, and some or same study may include electronic transcripts, yung mga hard copies ninyo, photography, pag yan ay photography and audio recorded, or finding a method to track or maintain all this data could pose a challenge to you as a researcher, and the data management should be determined early in the study so data could be catalog reviewed, analyzed, and as you collect the data. Okay, for the review of data for initial impressions, you have here Okay, once the data have been sorted and cataloged, okay, the researcher undertakes the first of the many reviews of data. The data will be examined in their entirety, of course, many times, but the first read through is helpful by establishing an overall impression of the data. So magkakaroon ka ng parang initial analysis na or impression of the overall of the data pag nabasa mo na lahat. It is recommended that the first reading just be a reading, binasa mo lang talaga rather than a review and a note-taking session. So babasahin mo lang siya, parang initial reading lang. Performing this initial review without preconceptions can give the researcher a sense of the data. So you have to avoid your biases. You have to do bracketing at this moment, okay? And the time to reflect on their meaning, not giving meaning based on how you perceive the data. The initial review should leave the researcher with general ideas about the tone of the data, impressions of the depth and the clarity of which informants present their ideas and thoughts about where the research should go next. So again, this is just the initial impression. How about reviewing or identifying a classification system? Of course, after a general impression has been gained from the read-through of the data, the researcher must develop a classification system. The researcher may establish a schematic schema, okay, to increase the manageability of the data. When you say schematic, it is a system of organizing data into present categories to allow examination for further analysis. So you have here, I think, a template, okay, an example for this one. For an example of coding schematic is nurses' reactions to perinatal death. So some of them is getting through the shift, nagkakaroon sila ng flight mode, symptoms of pain and loss, they have responses. Okay, this is just an example of schematic or coding schematic or coding schema. Okay, the development of a schematic as the classification system requires either substantial theoretical and literature background for an intense examination of the data. The development of general categories for data requires you as the researcher or the analyst to elicit underlying consistencies, yung mga concepts and clusters of concepts. And this intense examination raises many questions like, for example, what is this informant saying? What is going on? What does it mean? And what is this similar to, or what is this similar or different from? Okay. Developing codes and codebook. Okay. After completing an intense examination of the data and developing the overall schematic, the researcher develops more specific categories, meaning based on what has been gathered. So these categories are called codes. So sa grounded theory, we have the mother and child codes, or ang ginagamit natin. Codes support a mode or a better analysis, okay, of the data. They are chunks of meaning or pieces of data na sinasabi natin that are demonstrating the patterns or themes and the responses. So we have here the code book. The codes are labels and descriptions, while the code book is a guide for the qualitative analysis that outlines the individual codes with definitions, criteria for inclusion and examples, and unit of analysis, meaning the definition of a major entity that will be considered a subject for analysis. Okay, for the code development process, we have here setting and context codes. Okay, you have to identify then the elements of the setting or the environment that form patterns. Okay, number 2 would be perspective codes, meaning you have to relate the unique viewpoints of informants to the topic under study. Or 3, subjects' ways of thinking. You have to describe how informants frame their thoughts and actions about the topic. So magkakaroon kasi tayo na parang meron silang commonality. Kahit anong gawin mo, may mga informants na magpapareho sila ng sasabihin. When we say process codes for number 4, it outlines the ways things could be accomplished. At pag sinabi nating activity codes, it describes the things informants or others do. Pag sinabi nating strategy codes, it relates the strategies informants use to accomplish goals. And pag sinabi nating relationship codes, it identifies the ways individuals interact and relate to one another. And pag sinabi nating social structure codes, describe the ways how or the individuals interact in groups. So this list is not all-encompassing, but it does give the analyst a lens through which the example or they examine the patterns or the potential patterns of themes in the data. Okay, code the data. So after a code book has been developed, the analyst then codes the existing data by identifying or classifying each unit for analysis into coded category. This step requires the researcher to determine the unit of analysis within the piece of data. So pag sinabi nating unit analysis, that was defined later, it is the most basic segment or element, okay, of the raw data or information that could be assessed in a meaningful way regarding the phenomenon. A unit of analysis might comprise a word, a phrase, an artifact, a photograph, or a descriptive paragraph. So we have here the researcher reviews the data again and again, and this time identifying and labeling each unit of the analysis. So tingnan nyo to, parang kapareho niya. Ayan. So magli-label ka naman what are the keywords na nagamit. Like for example, 1.0 is the present. So ano yung ginamit nila? Reassuring, listening, spending time, touching, comforting, offering, or companionship. So what are the definition of this? Keywords is there is a need for a physical presence and actual proximity of the nurse unrelated to the procedures or the task. So you have to give meaning again, okay? Evaluate the codes to identify the overall theme. So this will be the last topic. Pag sinabi nating themes kasi you already, di ba, in a qualitative research, your title for the proposal is just a working title, because after which, okay, after the data gathering, you will have your final title, and your final title should be coming from the themes. So what are themes? It's implicit, recurring, and unifying ideas derived from the raw data in qualitative research, okay? So the coding process is the use of both to generate descriptions and to begin to interpretation of the themes and patterns in the data. And you have to identify themes in depth, okay, with the in-depth scrutiny of the codes and the data. And as a result of this scrutiny, themes emerge that encompass several codes, okay? So identifying themes with scrutiny, tandaan natin, a qualitative maybe from 10 to 60 codes for an analysis, but only a small number of themes should emerge. Hindi pwedeng lagyan mo lahat ng themes yan. Often, an analyst will arrive to one central theme that could now constitute the title with a small number of sub-themes based on several dozen of codes. You have to categorize. Okay, so pag sinabi kasi nating themes, as the word implies, okay, you recognize the data through categorization and analysis of individual units, okay, of meaning. So the processes described so far in this chapter or this lesson are completed as a part of one type of general approach to content analysis. Okay, so you have to bear in mind also that in qualitative research, you use software. Okay, qualitative generates a huge amount of data. The review and analysis involves a laborious process, of coding pieces of data into meaningful categories and developing overarching themes. Although many qualitative researchers prefer to manage data files and subsequent analysis manually, it is becoming common or far more common to manage this data via your specialized software and online services. However, the use of computer-based qualitative analysis continues to inspire controversy among qualitative researchers. There was a heartfelt rejection of the technology as a representation of the humanization over control and obsessions with technology. Kasi there are things that the technology could not analyze then versus a human being. So some perceive the process otherwise as holistic, interpretive, and organic becomes mechanical when it is automated, or some voice concerns that the efficiencies of automation will attempt qualitative researchers to use larger samples and sacrifice depth in favor of the breadth. So we have here, for qualitative research, others believe that using a computer for qualitative analysis makes the process go more quickly and easily without causing the researcher to lose touch with the data. They are quick point of, or they quick to point out, they are quick to point out that qualitative researchers embrace other types of technology such as cameras and audio recorders. So qualitative analysis software provides some very real advantages. So one of those is their ability to import, store, and secure data or confidential data. Okay, so but then again, we have to bear in mind that the human touch is always the best. So that is our lesson for today.